Can I speak with Keith Barsuhn, please?
Hi, it's Keith.
Hi, Keith. This is Staten Islander news
Oh, hi, yeah.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I am going through lots of catching up, that's for sure. Never take time off anymore. It just comes back to haunt you.
Yes, I know. So I was just calling. I wanted to speak with you about the Alice project, and maybe we could start off by you just kind of giving in your own words, like describing what it is, like for somebody who's never heard of it before and has no idea that this thing even exists.
You know, I guess the way I like to talk about it is, that I think there's a lot of focus everyone can understand when it comes to people who are in poverty as defined. But more people who are at that point of near poverty, that that living paycheck to paycheck. The people who are seemingly close to making it, but are really far away.
Mm-hmm.
And we're one, that old adage, your paycheck away. The number of people who have just zero savings to be able to should and are just again at a point where anything significant that changes the course of income or any expense that couldn't be that came their way that was significant, it sets them in that that terrible tailspin.
Right.
That moves them to poverty faster, and so many people are in that space, and that's where we try to think about how can we what's the right set of systems and support that can be put in place to help them gain better financial stability. And that's what I think Alice is really represents the people who are working hard being so harder economic conditions that are whether they're long term or short term.
So it would seem from what you said that this particular project, I don't know if it's specific to, I know it was created in New Jersey. That was what Laura Bruno had said. And then kind of like trickled out to a bunch of, I think, 13 other states, if I'm not mistaken. I might be mistaken,
Yeah.
I don't remember exactly. Was how to solve or like how to provide something for those people who are in that situation that can like help them along, so that if they got into such an emergency situation, which like an emergency could be a surgery without health insurance, a car repair, needing to buy a new car, any of those kinds of things. And statistically speaking, there is a very large percentage of the population. I think they had just done another study in 2019 that showed that like some ridiculous percentage of people are in that situation where if they had a major car repair or a major this or that or the other thing, they would just not be able to get out of that. So,
Right. Just with the workplace fluctuations are just make it even more challenging, and healthcare costs I think are always hugely problematic for so many families lately.
yes, yeah, and I mean, I know that there are programs out there that most people don't know about, like, just as an example, on Staten Island, I think the percentage of people who even knows that the Beacon Christian Community Center exists, which provides free health care if you meet their income levels. You can go to a doctor, a dermatologist, and something else, and gynecologist, and like, just like regular, ordinary doctors that some people would need to see all the time.
Right.
But nobody knows about that. It's something where there are things that exist, but it's also a problem of getting that information. And some people who are in these situations, they just have their phone. They don't even have a computer or a tablet or something connected to the internet other than their phone, and it's much harder to research stuff on your phone, because I've tried. When I'm out, I'm like, I'm just going to do it on my desktop, but like there are some people who don't even have that choice. So what I wanted to talk about, like the data that you guys have, like I think it was 45% of families in New York City. Or was it New York State that's under the Alice number? Was that the city?
No, New York State.
It's New York State. Okay. So, do you guys how was the data collected? Like, was it something where it was based on interviews? Was it based on census data that was then crunched in a different way to provide these numbers, or how did the data come to be?
Well, that's again, and that's where the New Jersey folk have been working on that kind of all the in-depth. But that's it's not about asking people by any kind of a survey. It's getting a lot of data that is available that they mine, that identifies households and the percentage of households, with their income, their size of household, the type of that it's a lot of different data sets that are available, and it's just a matter of how they you look at all those that data is and that's always the challenge of this is when we talk about looking at data that we say is we released in 2020, it's really about data that's the actual experience of that from which the data we're talking about in 2020 is actually 2018 year, because it just takes that that couple years for all the data to get into various places that it can get pulled and used for this purpose.
Right. Yeah, so I was reading a book recently, and they had a quote in it, and now I don't remember what the book was, but the quote was that statistics, and by that extension data, is people with the stories taken out. So like, it's just, you don't like, what is that person's life experience? Well, they have this much money, and they have this much this, and they have this much that, but what is their actual life experience at this point? And that's I know that's kind of what our readers would be the most interested in. So what I have, the kind of question that I would have is, I understand that it was, that the numbers were arrived at using data and stuff like that. Has there also been like outreach to find these that you guys are familiar with, that you guys are trying to assist, and like whose stories you could share of like what it's actually like to have that experience?
Very much so that we at local United Ways use this data in a number of ways. They work with other partners in their community, from government to other key nonprofits, and working together to understand how many people certain nonprofit organizations are attempting to serve who are within the ALICE threshold. And then and the other piece is how you begin to look you're earning more income, you no longer qualify for something, and then all of a sudden, boom, it's the cliff. You fall off a cliff almost financially because you're back down to this, negative net income, and you got to build your way back out of that. Well, one of the things that we try to do is, local United Ways try to do is provide support and programs and activity that can help these people move back into that positive state of growth that they were working on, and again, and also to help mitigate any other short-term crisis that may be coming. And that's why we all were tremendously nervous about the impact of COVID on this population. Where it really throws so many of them into a state of poverty.
Right.
There's so many moving parts right now going on, but it's one of the things we're trying to understand now. And the next time we look at developing the data, that we will have some data experience around the impact of COVID more definitively. So but yes, it's many United Ways and looking at out and understand who the Alice's are in their communities that they serve, and how to and how we all work together in supporting those individuals and especially families.
So if somebody reads this article and they're like, oh, this is why I've been struggling so much, I'm under this Alice threshold, what can I do? Like, how would they go about finding something, finding people to help them?
The very first thing I would tell them to do, very, very simple, everyone can do it, 211. You have a phone, you can dial 211. If you've got a computer, you can put 211.org. What you're going to get is someone on the other side of that who has some experience in helping you understand what your needs are and how to help you find the right places in your community for you to get help and support. That's something 211 is something that we, United Ways throughout the state, we have driven as one of the most comprehensive places to go to understand where they can get help and support from human services. And that's been helpful throughout the pandemic. As many people use 211 to find, to get them through their emergency that came as a result of the pandemic.
Yeah.
It's also been helpful to find out, how to deal with COVID, where to find vaccinations and so forth.
Because I know, like, in with myself, just with people that I have known, that I've worked with in the past, pre-pandemic, I know from some of them, most of them live in New Jersey, and even though New Jersey and New York were both involved, they're all involved in the unemployment program, and they were supposed to be giving benefits to freelancers and gig workers and people like that, there are still some in New Jersey, and I don't know about New York, but I do know about in New Jersey that just never got it. And it's been a year and a half now, and then it's like they were getting nothing because they couldn't work, because their, whatever employment that they had, these were people who were in like hospitality and stuff, so their jobs were shut down. And then I had a couple of them, I also knew a couple of people in the same industry who, they told me New Jersey said go to New York, because they lived in the Bronx. They were lucky. They lived in the Bronx, but they worked in New Jersey, but the Bronx took care of them. New York City took care of them. Did not care of them in that regard with the pandemic, with the unemployment benefits. And I don't know about other benefits that New Jersey was supposed to offer, but I know with like the CARES Act and all of that stuff. So people who were affected in that way would have contacted you guys from 211, but they might not have even known about 211, because I didn't know about 211. I didn't know about 311. I didn't know about 211. So that's, and I feel bad asking, like, how have you been doing? Because some of them have been really struggling, moved in with their parents, moved in with friends, relatives, because they couldn't afford their rent anymore, stuff like that. So it's been I know, like with the pandemic, it is pretty crazy. So that's definitely good that you guys are working on ways to help people that are in this situation. So I actually.
Well, it's
Go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say it's never one. There's not one. Even as we've talked about before, an Alice family is on the on the verge of it takes one difficult experience, say a large healthcare cost, and boom, then they're Alice families, and it really isn't just one particular vulnerability. There are multiple issues typically that happen. They're in a job situation that that with a little more skill training would improve their job position, whether it's in the current one or somewhere else. So job training and access to a better job is something you work on, as well as you're working on some of their health-related concerns, as well as you're working on a better education, even for the children, or even for young adults who can continue to, where education will help them earn a better living. And you're looking at, lots of times it's major transportation issues that are under. So there's always so many different things that when you're able to understand the totality of the challenges that they are experiencing, it's not just one idea, go get help with this. It's more holistic, and when we can work with the type of these families in their community.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you said that you guys actually work with other organizations?
I think that's a big part of what, the United Way model, we actually do a lot of, the modern United Way now is a very active partner and leader in a community to come up to work with other groups of organizations, nonprofits, foundations, local governments, to actually come up with a more effective, system and plan to serve and support people like Alice, and looking at best practices that are happening in other parts of not only the state but the country, to look at models where when you really begin to work together and you come up with the same kind of goals and outcomes, you find you're more efficient in how you actually can serve. So that's a big part of what United Way does now is be a part of that solution for better outcome, and outcome in this case that more Alice threshold families rise higher, and so when you focus then on the right community outcomes, that helps everyone in their organization, adjust their goals to support those community outcomes. And so we work hard in that kind of a community planning role with others.
Okay.
It really does take groups of organizations to put their heads together and so we can accomplish more. And it's also for those who have the capacity to support it more, it's more attractive too.
Right. And I guess, so going back to what you were just saying about, organizations helping people together. So let's say that there was an Alice family that contacted 211 because they qualify for unemployment and they didn't get it, let's say, during the pandemic. What kind of options would you offer to such a family? Would you send them to the schools to get food, or would you just let them know what's available in their area, or is it more of a one-on-one kind of an in-depth, really trying to work with individual families to try to help them move away from that threshold?
Well, it's a little bit of both. Because if you were, and this is something, and by the way, when I say 211, yes, I also think about 311. New York is a little different. It's a very similar model and a good model, but it's obviously 311 has always been the working with them, and it's having a positive impact. There is more of an effort to ensure those who, especially in the ALIS threshold, that we are providing that kind of more ongoing continuum of care and support. We hope they are getting that from the places that they were sent to. But the more we can kind of close that loop is kind of our goal, to continue to improve our system that way.
Yes.
So we can also ensure people aren't falling through the cracks.
Right. That makes sense. So obviously, I mean, I would have expected that you would have been swamped with calls during the pandemic itself. Did you, and you had said that the call centers noticed that people would come for one thing and then they would get that help and then they would come back if they needed something else.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of times when they're calling the call center, they'll find out before the call is ended. And then plus that they may call because they had such positive experience and something else has come up. Correct.
Right. And one of the other questions that I had was based on the what do you call it? The press release that you sent me. There was actually a quote in there that said, economic data shows that the number of low-wage jobs increased by 33% from 2007 to 2018 and accounted for the largest number of jobs in New York in 2018. And I'm wondering what you guys were referencing as low-wage jobs. So could you just share what you mean by low-wage jobs?
Yeah. So let me give you some example on that. So if you look at occupations by employment and wage in 2018, so growth in low-wage jobs were places like, for example, with even retail salespersons. That's back in 2018. That's just under $12 an hour as a median hourly wage, and there's, and that was, and so, which is, quite challenging to, again, sustain a family on. So that's an example. Cashiers, personal care aides, home health aides, just even. Just going through some of the larger ones here: janitors, cleaners, the fast food industry folks. These are all, the number of jobs are somewhere near or over 200, around 200,000. And again, the wages will range from $15 an hour to as low as $12 an hour. Okay. Which are very, very difficult to be. So those are, when you look at some of the areas where there's been growth, and again, it's growth that's difficult to sustain family.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's interesting
for some it might be a first job, which is good, but see, it's just all continuing to get on that continuum of being able to move up.
Right. And so I guess the question that I had was, did it consider that is minimum wage, I believe, in New York in 2018, but
I'll be honest with you, I'm going to guess that there was something being passed by the state.
Okay.
And I can, there's places to validate that for you. One of the challenges you have in just even in working with me, because even my role here at United Way as the interim CEO is, and I'm helping to, while they're in between a permanent CEO hire, which is what's beginning to happen. I've been helping to understand
what you were talking about isn't even considering like the gig employment industry, the restaurant industry where they are exempt from minimum wage laws. You're actually talking about jobs where people are actually getting minimum wage, and minimum wage, for sure, at $12 an hour is not really a livable wage.
Right.
For pretty much,
one of the, and as I'm looking at this list of occupations that we identify, even the strongest position, one of the stronger jobs here is registered nurses, where the median is $40 an hour. But again, it's and there is still a significant number of hours, family, and again, it all depends on your family size. And I've seen this where, again, you can be increasing your ability. If you were a registered nurse, what did you do? You actually went to school. How did you pay for that? You took out debt. You now have a degree. You can earn a better wage, but you're also paying back debt. You earn a better wage. You lose child care subsidy, for example.
Right.
And so you're back where you started from before you were even a registered nurse earning a better wage. So that's that's kind of the conundrum that is created. Yeah.
So and
I can send you something that from the 2018 data that shows these types of jobs.
Because that's something, I wasn't, because that's why I was like asking you, because like when I think of low wage jobs, I think of fast food, and I don't go past that because I'm like, well, what else is low wage? Because most other things, you need an education. I know you don't need as much of an education to be a home health aide, but you need to go to college and get student debt and all of that stuff, and then you can only make $12 an hour. That seems pretty not very cool, but and a lot of the jobs that you just mentioned have been affected by the child care pandemic issues, because a lot of them are women, like nurses, the other ones that you said, the restaurant industry, hospitality. They tend to be more women in them, and I don't know if you are familiar with what was happening with the schools in New Jersey. I'm not sure if they were doing exactly the same thing in New York, but the schools in New York didn't open until like June something, so in New York City. So up until that time, what were parents doing is they were staying home and taking care of their kids and dealing with the repercussions of that. And actually I had been having conversations with a couple of women who I know who had been pregnant, who gave birth, had a baby, decided, I want to stay off from work for a year or steps, his first words, his first teething, all that kind of stuff. And when they went back into the workforce, they were essentially punished for having left the workforce for a year or two by getting a job that pays less than the one that they were qualified for and that they had before they quit to take care of their child. So, and that's just people that I'm personally familiar with, that I know of, that have had this situation. I didn't know that happened to people. I didn't realize that if you leave the workforce for a particular amount of time, you are not going to get paid what you were getting paid before. So that's a really tough decision, and sometimes it's not even your own decision. Let's say somebody has a surgery or an injury and has to have a surgery or something, they're going to be out of the workforce for a while, and then when they come back in, if they were already having a problem with their income before, it's just going to be made worse by that time that they took off. So
and while sometimes even during this pandemic, they couldn't pay the rent, but it was also a moratorium on rent evictions. Eventually those will go away, and they're going to still owe. And how they reconcile that? There's so many things that, while they had temporary relief, and even while there's been all the, these still, there's going to still be a real serious problem that's going to happen in the not too distant future.
Yeah.
Which is what we're all trying to pay attention to.
And then I know that one of the other things with the eviction moratorium is that larger landlords who had big buildings or multiple properties and millions of dollars in the bank were able, quite easily to survive it. But people who have like a two-family house and they rented out the downstairs, or a duplex or whatever, and they have their house and they have one house, those people were literally like filing for bankruptcy and unable to pay their mortgages because the eviction moratorium has repercussions to smaller landlords that nobody really, when people talk about the eviction moratorium, they do talk about the tenant side, but that's assuming that all landlords are, in the millions of dollars range, when the reality is, if you look in any communities, in any towns, especially in New York City, most of the houses that are being rented by small landlords who, basically it's just their secondary residence, or maybe they have three, and they're not getting paid for any of them. So it's like, everything just, it's kind of like, I think somebody had said that, hey, you're going to get, then everything comes due, and then you've got an avalanche of not good things. It's the pandemic, I think, I know it was the worst thing that ever happened to humanity. You could just say that right now. Worst thing ever.
And now we're all getting nervous again because the numbers are going back up, so we just wonder what's going to happen.
It's not even over yet. It is not over. Nobody declared that it was over, because it isn't. So it's just like, well, now what? Now what? Are we going to have lockdowns again? I cannot even imagine. So.
Yeah. By the way, while you're talking, I did cut and paste our link to our site, which takes you right to the ALICE information and data.
Oh, perfect.
And on there, I think it's the second little mini brochure. You can click on that and scroll into that, and you can see all the different wages that we highlight and talk about. And
fantastic.
And their median incomes, which helps to paint more of a picture.
Because this is.
Yeah, I think you'll find the information we've got here is, again, very comprehensive. It's a lot. It's a lot of information, and even we continue to want to understand better, what are the key drivers on how you can turn around an Alice family. What how you get others working with you on that.
Awesome. Now, the other thing is, you had mentioned that you have that you work with other organizations. Let's say there was an organization that's relatively new. I'm actually familiar with one that we actually work with. Have had, they've written stories for us in the past. The Assertive Kids Foundation, just as an example. How would they get involved in helping out with the Alice families? Like, would they contact the United Way, or is there like a procedure that they would go through? Like, if there was a charity that wants to get involved in trying to help, the United Way to solve this issue.
Yeah, I think reaching out to their local United Way is always a good place to start. There's and depending on the charity, the type of work they're providing, how long they've been around, they probably have some sense of who all the other players are. I think it's always important that nonprofits that are independent but have similar missions, that the leaders of those nonprofits
And I just have one final question. So I know that the federal government, the federal poverty level, is just basically, they just took all the states' poverty levels, averaged them, smushed them together into one number, and that guides. I know New York gives aid to people who make 100% exactly the federal poverty level. New Jersey covers that. Are there any plans or anything in the works with the United Way and the ALICE program to try to, I guess, convince the government or the census or whoever it is that would need to do this to make a state-by-state poverty line rather than a general whole federal poverty line?
I think I'm not sure. I think every state, thinks of what their poverty levels look like. I mean, if you in certain areas of the country, cost of living is significantly different. One of the things that drives that significant difference is housing. In fact, I spent a little time in the Bay Area, San Francisco, and when you talk about housing, that is such a game changer on a negative way to so many families. I mean, their income doesn't go much very far at all, even compared to other states. So that's why you will see some different state by state in how they define poverty level. That's what's really happening with their local, the cost of living in their areas. Of course, that in New York State, that even can widely vary from downstate.
Right. Because I know
versus,
from
up in Adirondack.
Because I know from people who we knew people in the past about a few years back, maybe 7 or 8 years ago, who had applied for New York aid because they had lost their job and stuff like that, and the poverty level that New York was using at that time was the exact poverty level of the federal government. I think it was $1,000 a month, and that was it. If you made more than $1,000 a month, which, I mean, as I'm sure you know, if you make $1,000 a month, you are either couch surfing, which is the new homeless, where you live with a friend and you either pay them something or you don't, or you're on the street or you're in a shelter. There's no way that a person who's a single person can afford an apartment in New York City and food, clothing, and all of that other stuff for $1,000 a month. That was the number that they were using. I don't know if they're still using the federal poverty number. I would hope that they're not, but I wouldn't know that at this point. But I do know that years back they were not.
Yeah, and I think we always encourage them to, again, look at the ALICE data and what the needs are for ALICE. And then we create an agenda where we are encouraging the state to really focus on solutions that will benefit everyone, including expanding working family tax credits. One thing that is also our agenda says the state ought to also help us with how we ensure internet access is affordable and accessible to all. There are so many people who can't even apply for a job because they don't have the means to do that at home because there's no paper application anymore.
Right.
If you don't have the internet, if you don't have a laptop, or you don't have the means to do it online, you can't get the job. You can't even be considered. So, that's,
there was.
You might not be able to walk to, you don't have a car, you don't have transportation, you can't walk to a local, a place that would have internet access, perhaps like a local library. But so there's things that we really advocate that we want to see more support for earned income tax credits is another one. So many people have didn't realize the different tax credits that are available to them, and so many United Ways drive that earned here's ways to really work on this, and where we all should work on this in this way by expanding and focusing support for the different ways, programs that will help the ALICE and those families in poverty.
Right, and to what you were saying, with where you could, would have to go to a place with internet access, even if you had access to a library. They only opened up, I think, three weeks ago. So prior to that, there was no library internet access, and of course, during the pandemic, Starbucks were closed, so there was no internet access there either. So yeah, I see exactly what you're saying. Yeah, it's kind of like there's a lot of little loops. Where people can get stuck in a loop and not know how to get out of that loop, that knot or whatever, and then it just becomes like a real problem. Like, how do you get a job if you can't apply for a job, if you have no internet, if you're just using your phone and you can't do the application over your phone, etc. And that's just one loop, and there's so much that doesn't seem like poverty to people.
Yeah, I'll also make sure, although actually we're working on our updating our agenda, what we call our ALICE agenda for the state. But I can also send you a link to that agenda, just so you can kind of track, what we are advocating to state government should be a priority when it comes to focusing on the ALICE population.
Okay. And I know that it's a lot of different stuff. I know that you're very busy and stuff. Did you happen to read in the email that we were asking if you guys would be able to put together something for us, or give us permission to use something if you already have it, that would introduce somebody who that's like written, that or could be written, that somebody who has no familiarity with ALICE, where it could be defined for them. Because we're actually planning a series of articles for this, and hoping to get some collaboration from you guys with that series, because I want to, this is definitely something that we want to focus on, because it does affect a lot of people. So I wasn't sure if you had seen that, if that was something that you guys would be able to do.
Yes, I think I can get something together for you and get some the answer.
If whenever you're able to, if you could do it within the next week or two, that would be ideal. But if you do need more time than that, then just let me know, and then we would wait on that. And we're probably going to publish the press release that you had sent me, but we want something a little bit more in depth of, I mean, I guess it's kind of like, this is just something most people are not even aware of. They don't even realize that there are people out there who are struggling, even though it doesn't look like they're struggling, because they have a house and they eat well, and their kids have good clothes that they probably bought at the thrift store or something, or got from another charity. That a lot of this is just invisibility, and we're trying to shine a light on this invisible group, basically. So that would kind of be the goal of our series that we wanted. We're hoping to be able to do, to kind of collaborate with you guys and do something like that, because you're definitely way more familiar with this than any of our writers are. So you would have kind of like the real ability to kind of make it understandable to people, because you understand it already. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, I do. So, and by the way, do you, your readership, where is your readership? Because you all help you with kind of personalizing it with kind of stories and the impact. Right. And I want to make sure, does it matter, if this is, you're out of Staten Island, you're probably not looking to have, Buffalo, examples of Buffalo, New York necessarily.
Right, but I mean, a lot of, so Staten Island is our specific area. I know we have some readers in Brooklyn, so if you only have Brooklyn's examples, then that would be acceptable, but I think that you might have Staten Island examples too. But I know that, I don't know if Staten Islanders ask for help from organizations as much. So, they might just ask for help from their families, as opposed to, going and stepping outside of that. So if you don't have examples of Staten Island families, then examples of families in Brooklyn would be acceptable as well.
Okay. So what I probably will do is, let me confer with our United with New York City folk, and what we'll do is I'll set up another time for us
That would be fantastic. And once I do publish I was recording this conversation, the YouTube video and the article, which is really just going to be a brief article telling people to go look at the video. And I look forward to hearing back from you. And it was really good to speak with you.
Great. Likewise. Thanks, Heather.
Thank you so much.
Talk soon.
Have a great day.
All right. You too. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.